Okay, so we're interviewing Gloria Donan Sosin, and it's February 9th today, February 9th, 2019. Yes. So, Gloria, why don't you tell us how old you are?
I was born at United Hospital, which no longer exists, on March 21st, 1922. It scares me to think that I'm going to be 97, but here I am.
It's amazing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and vertical.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, 96, almost 97. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
in
you'll
a
be
couple of
97 in
weeks.
a few weeks. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we wanted to interview you about your service in the military during
Okay.
World War II.
Debbie, you want to get my jacket?
Oh, sure.
Oh,
Where is
yeah,
it?
that would be
It's
great.
in the closet in my bedroom
Okay.
on the left-hand side. No, on the right-hand side.
Okay.
Okay. So we'll talk while Debbie gets your jacket.
Yeah.
So what years were you were in the Women's Army Corps, correct?
Yes, the WAC.
Mm-hmm.
I enlisted on Lexington Avenue, and there was a recruiting place in the city,
Mm-hmm.
and that's where I went in to enlist. There wasn't any, I guess there was nothing local. I'm also trying to remember. There was a training course in Fort Oglethorpe, Georgia,
Mhm.
and that's where I spent 6 weeks training,
Mm-hmm.
learning.
So you enlisted on Lexington Avenue in New York City
Yeah, there was
at the recruiting office,
yes,
and then you trained at Fort Oglethorpe
Fort Oglethorpe, Georgia.
in Georgia for 6 weeks.
Yeah, and then from there, I came north again to, I think, to Upton. There's another place too.
Mhm.
Anyway,
And then you served. You said at Fort Upton.
beg your
On
pardon?
you served. You some of your time was at Camp Upton on Long Island.
Yes.
Mhm.
And actually was always sort of with the medical corps. And when I got sick, they sent me to Brentwood. It was called Mason General Hospital.
Mhm.
And from there, I was the editor of the paper. I don't know where that is. At any rate,
The editor of was it a military paper?
yeah.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Also, it turned out that I knew some of the guys. One was from White Plains, and I don't know.
What did you do at the hospital, Mom?
What, darling?
What did you do at the hospital?
What was your job
what
at the
was your-
hospital?
Talk to Ellison.
Oh, I was doing the newspaper. And I may have somewhere, but I didn't look for it.
Mhm.
The paper that came out periodically. I don't remember the period.
Didn't you do social work of some kind or something you told me about? Were you a social worker in the Army?
Yes.
Tell Allison about that. Didn't you interview people?
I interviewed people. I wrote about them. There was a guy from White Plains. That was funny.
Mm-hmm. So were they people who served overseas during the war?
Some of them had served overseas and been remanded, I guess is the word, to Long Island.
Mm-hmm. And so you interviewed them
I interviewed them.
to find out how they were doing after
Right,
their
with
service.
Pictures. And my father had served in Upton, and so he was delighted when I was there because he knew how to get there, and he felt very comfortable,
Mm-hmm.
not
Mhm.
just visiting in their own military what?
Did you stay friends with some of the women who were in the Women's Army
No.
Corps? No, you didn't stay in touch with any of them.
What? Maybe not really.
Not really. Yeah. Yeah. And then can you tell me a little bit about what your husband was doing during the war as well, since he's not able to tell us his story? Can you?
He didn't tell his story, did he?
So,
Can you tell us? Yeah. So why don't you tell us what he?
His name was Gene Simpson, and he was doing Japanese. He went to the Japanese school in Colorado, Colorado Springs, and he was very adept at languages because he also knew, he was excellent in French and German,
Mhm.
Russian, and that's how we met.
Mhm.
At Columbia, we were both at graduate school. It's called the Harriman Institute, which concentrates on Russia.
Mhm.
And I went there before he did, and we had a group that we called the Russian Circle of the people in the language studies, and I was the chairman of this little circle that we had. And one day he shows up and waits at the exit for me, introduces himself, and asks if I want to go to lunch. So that was the beginning of the romance.
that was after.
And that was after the
war.
war. Mm-hmm.
That was after the war, Mom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
So you.
during the war, tell Allison a little more about what Daddy did during the war.
He decoded Japanese I don't know where they got the papers. Some of them were found diaries of the Japanese had the military men, and I don't know how they got a hold of these diaries, but they were very helpful because it mentioned military things. And she was very adept at languages. And I know that. Well,
Mm-hmm.
that's Japanese. What
So-
else do we know in Japanese?
So he lived in Washington D.C. during the
lived in-
war.
Yes, and then he had been married before, and so he had an apartment. What do you call it? I've forgotten what they called it. Right, Avenue C in the city. It had a name. Do you know?
In Manhattan,
Yeah, downtown
Alphabet City.
Hmm?
Avenue C in Manhattan.
Manhattan, ABC.
Mm-hmm.
And,
So that was called Alphabet City, or it's the Lower East Side,
yeah,
or the East Village,
Hmm.
but Alphabet City. Yeah.
I can't
yeah.
remember what it was
Yeah.
called.
Yeah.
And that's how we met.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you met after the war, but during the war he was a
Yeah.
decoder for the
Right.
army,
No, it was during the war.
The Navy.
or for the Navy. Okay. Okay.
What time?
Dad was in the Navy. You were in the Army.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So maybe
Well, that's right.
Eliza, you can stop it.